If a participant wishes to speak, could they please use the remote raise your hand function in the left-hand side of your screen? And then when the chair sees that the hand has been raised, he will then, in the order that is displayed on the screen, invite the relevant member to speak. Can you just be a little patient with the system at the moment? Because as you know, on the internet as well, there is usually a time lag. So, just be a little patient and not to press the button again, if you wouldn't mind. When invited to be addressed by the chair, please could all participants under the legislation ensure that their microphone and camera are on at that time. If you've got issues with your camera, just let us know and we will make that a note, but we can carry on if your audio is working. If neither are working, can you drop a mention in the chat facility, which you will also see on your screen? And if there are any further issues during the meeting, please contact the Democratic Services Officer who's supporting the meeting, and we will endeavour to make sure that you engage as soon as possible. If that's all, I would like to hand over to the chair now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you just clarify for me? I can't see any people here, so they're not going to be able to raise their hands. They'll have to use the. There must be a system for raising their hands if they want to comment. Is that right?
Yes, Chair. If you see on your screen on the left-hand side at the bottom, you will see a raise your hand function.
All right.
They will click that, and then in the column, you will see that they will have raised their hand in the column, and you'll know they're in the queue then, and you can call them in when you're ready.
Fine. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. Well, before we start the meeting, I think it would be remiss of me not to mention the news that we received in the last couple of weeks about Debbie's new appointment to Cardiff. I'm not sure whether I should say we're pleased or sad to see you go, but I'm sure we congratulate you on your appointment. You've been a great help to me, and I'm sure to other members here throughout my term. I gather we won't lose you immediately, but I'm sure we all wish you well in your new post. So now we'll move on to the formal part of the meeting. Part one, any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, Mr. Tallaght. Thank you.
Right. 2 minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of November 2023. I read those through last night, and there were no issues as far as I was concerned. Has anybody got any points to raise, or are you all happy to accept it? I take it that absolute silence means that everybody's happy. Is that right? Because I can't see any reaction. Okay. Now we move on to applications to receive declarations of interest and the nature of such interests. Are there any, please? Again, I take silence to mean no, nothing, there's no declarations of interest there. Okay, we'll now move on to the reports of the monitoring officer. Item 4, applications for dispensation, and I think, Debbie, there are 2.
There are, thank you. And just before I start, I'd just like to thank you for those kind words at the outset of the meeting. They're very, very much appreciated, and obviously very much enjoyed working with yourself and the committee, and continuing to do so until I leave for my new post. So thank you for that. So with regards to agenda item 4, applications for dispensation, committee has 2 applications before it this morning. Quite similar applications, you'll have noticed. So the first application is from Councillor Hennessy, and it's an application to speak and vote. He's also added into the application to remain in meetings, but if he's granted a dispensation to speak and vote, that would follow. So to speak and vote, it's quite a wide application. So it's in respect of community centres being discussed before the Vale of Glamorgan council meeting. I would add that Councillor Hennessy is not on a town or community council. So it's a very wide application. You'll see the application is requested to run the dispensation if granted until the next local elections, and the application's under ground D and F, and you have those set out within your papers. D being nature of the members' interest is such that the members' participation would not damage public confidence, and F that the participation of the member in the business to which the interest relates is justified by the member's particular role or expertise. So a bit more detail is contained in the application. We're advised that Councillor Hennessy has recently been appointed to the chair of the Celtic Way Community Centre in Roos. There isn't a community council in Roos, so I'll just add that. He hasn't been appointed by the council. He sets out his role on the Conservative group for the Vale Council. He talks about his experience, and then I think this is particularly pertinent for committee's consideration. The penultimate paragraph in his application, he refers to in my position as chair of the community centre, he would be responsible for a number of aspects, in particular finances, and may need to address council meetings on such matters. Should a committee be minded to do so, you may wish to consider, because of that financial element, you may wish to consider granting a dispensation to speak and vote, save when matters relate specifically to the Celtic Way Community Centre, and in those circumstances, or specifically relate to financial matters, you might want to qualify it further. But when there are financial matters relating to that community council, dispensation be to speak only, so that he can contribute to the debate. Happy to assist further. I can see Mrs. Tinsley has a hand up.
Thank you. Before I asked Lorna to speak, that was my reaction when I read it, that I made a note to say where it related to Celtic Way Community Centre. Yes, Lorna.
Oh, she got it.
Okay.
Carry on, Lorna.
Okay. I was just saying I was troubled by that myself, and providing that amendment's made, I'm happy for that to proceed with that small amendment.
Lorna, can you turn your mic off, please?
Yeah.
And Councillor Franks, are you able to help us?
Could I wish Debbie well also? And I'll let you all into a little secret. In Cardiff, they have not been told that Debbie is going to be the chief officer, and they're keeping it a deadly secret. But we're in the know, so that's always nice, isn't it? There is one slight thing I would say. This councillor is also a Barry Town councillor. Should we give him protection for community centres in the town? Because I half heard the monitoring officer saying he's not a community councillor. Well, I think he is in Barry. I'd like a bit of clarity.
I was advised that he wasn't, but and indeed it's not on the face of his application. Having said that, it's not on the face of the next application, albeit I'm being advised that Emma Goodjohn is on Barry Town Council. So Karen is doing a further check. So what I would suggest, we could move on, but it might be that we come back. Oh, I think Karen might have some further information for us.
Right, it seems he is on Barry Town Council. So does that make a difference?
I would suggest, I mean, it's not on the face of his application, but as I said, it's not on the face of Councillor Emma Goodjohn's application, albeit it's in the body of the report. It refers to her being on Barry Town Council. In the circumstances, if you're minded to do so, I think it would be appreciated by Councillor Hennessy if the dispensation applies as we've run through, speak and vote save when matters relate to Celtic Way Community Centre, and then just to speak on those matters in respect of the Vale of Glamorgan Council and Barry Town Council.
Right, well, I'm happy with that. Has anybody got any objections? Take silence to be no, so we'll that will be approved as you suggested. We then move on to Emma Goodjohn, which is similar, I gather.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so again, it's an application for a dispensation up until the next local elections, ground D and F being relied upon. It's an application to speak and vote, and on the basis that Councillor Goodjohn, Emma Goodjohn, is the chair of Buttrell's Community Association and also a member of the Highlight Park Community Centre. The details are set out within the body of the application, again making reference to the finances and the need to address council meetings on such matters. So I would suggest you may wish to consider this on the same footing as the application submitted and determined in respect to Councillor Hennessy.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy with that. Is everybody happy? Anybody object to that method of moving forward? No. So that will be granted on the same that basis. Thank you very much. Observations by independent members of town and community council meetings. I gather there's been one by Pat, who managed to observe it all the way from Australia, but she's not able to report to us today. But I think we've got Karen. You've got a copy of her report. Is that right?
Yes, Chair. If you don't mind, I'll read it directly from what she sent me today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just opening up in my Microsoft Outlook. Okay, Mrs. Hallett has stated that her visit was a follow-up observation visit of St. Donat's following some concerns that she had raised earlier. The meeting she observed was held on the 6th of December. She confirms that the criteria specified in the observation checklist had been complied with, including areas of concern following a previous visit. Those had been addressed, and obviously we had discussed them with the clerk and chair as well. The positioning of the camera, she said during the meeting, had been repositioned, which had meant that all the members could now be clearly seen, and that was something she picked up previously. The discussions at this particular meeting in December were focused and relevant, and the outcomes were clearly summarised by the chair and, where appropriate, voted upon. Any declarations of interest were requested by the chair, and members confirming that there were none to report. At previous observation, she stated that there was confusion as to what constituted personal interest, and she understood that further training had been given. And again, I can advise that following discussions with the chair and clerk, the recommendation was that further training, be arranged, and that was a matter for the clerk and the chair and the council to decide how that should be done, whether it should be done by calling in somebody from One Voice Wales who had previously given that training before, or whether the clerk was going to provide that. And it's good to see that those recommendations have been addressed. And she also stated that she was pleased to report that there were no code of conduct standard issues that needed to be considered in relation to this meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Well, that sounds satisfactory. I don't know if anybody wants to comment. There's not a great deal of point in asking questions, but if anybody wants to comment, please do so. No comments there. So we'll note that. That's good. And then we move on to item 6, which is the overview report following observations by independent members of Town and Community Council committee meetings. Hopefully you've all had the opportunity of reading the report, which has been prepared. It's very thorough. It gives a history of how it's progressed over the last, I think, 2 or 3 years. I think personally that there has been an improvement from what I've seen, and I think that's shared by the other independent members. Subject to anything you want to say, Debbie, I'm going to open it up to discussion.
Thank you, Chair. No, I think, as you rightly say, it's a very comprehensive report. I think it reflects well on the town and community councils, but indeed the hard work of the independent members of this committee as well. And I think you'll see woven into the report some of the feedback coming from the clerks, which I think is very positive. So nothing further to add to the comprehensive report. Thank you.
Thanks. The plan, Karen, is that we won't do this again now for a year or two. Is that right?
For the benefit of the committee, a few months back, the committee agreed that because the majority of town and community councils are being observed were undertaking their role, as efficiently as possible and and well managed, that the committee agreed that we would undertake observations on a biannual basis as opposed to every year. Although there is delegated power which you've given to the monitoring officer, that if there are any issues or raised during the year, and she feels that a visit would be worthwhile, that she would recommend that a member undertakes a visit, and then obviously that would be reported, and I would contact the independent members to see who would be available to do such a visit.
So that's the next civic year. Effectively, it'll only be those cases where it's considered necessary. Good, thank you. Lorna, would you like to comment?
Yeah, hopefully I'll get it right this time with my buttons. Yes, I agree that we've benefited from our experiences going to these various meetings and that we've seen an improvement. My slight concern is that in the report, there's a lot of vague terms. So majority, some, most of, majority again. And I'm concerned that when we come to do this review again, that we've got no actual measurements. So are those measurements held by yourselves and that we could make reference to them if necessary? Because otherwise, let's say none of us were on this committee the next time there is a report, how will the new committee be able to judge that there's been an improvement or not? Because we don't have any actual numbers or percentages in the report.
I think that's a good point. It did concern me that might be considered to be vague, but unless you start pinpointing and saying, well, Penarth was hopeless and Cowbridge was brilliant, or Llantwit needed this, I think it's very difficult to do it. But I'm open to ideas. Debbie?
I think it's a very good point. I suppose we have the previous reports, don't we? We also have the data that has been submitted by each independent member when they undertake their review. So there's a wealth of that data which is held in the office, and it will be retained and judged against. So there is a wealth of data, but we haven't incorporated all of that detail within this report. But it is held, and certainly it's available to cross-reference.
Thank you. It occurs to me that we could, I suppose, give marks, and if they ticked 10 boxes out of the 20, then they got 50%, and then we could compare it next year. But I don't think that really is a good idea. Lorna, do you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Richard. No, I think if the data is held then centrally, and if necessary, we can look deeper into it. But if our overall feeling is there has been a significant improvement, I'm content with that as long as we minute that. And then if there are concerns with future reviews, then they can always go back to that minute and go back and dig deeper into the data and say, well, actually, why do they feel that way? Perhaps that's the meeting note that needs to be said. And actually the additional note of, and we couldn't identify, because we were dealing with such small numbers, we couldn't identify exact percentages or exact locations, because that would have been inappropriate.
Right, thank you for that. Councillor Summers?
I just wonder whether it might be beneficial to perhaps sort of flag up in that report, sort of the top 5 concerns that we might want to carry forward to review again next year, without identifying necessarily any specific council, but just those that appear to be, maybe 5 is too many, maybe the top 3 or something, but just to give ourselves some particular targets going forward.
Yes, a good point. I mean, 210 actually deals with the last overview report in March 2022, and I think there are 6 problems there. Sorry, Debbie, do you want to comment? Or?
I think possibly the independent members going out again to view would find at that particular point the information that we can share as officers being very much targeted to the individual town and community council, rather than it being sort of a general observation. Because I think obviously the pro forma is available so that independent members have that guidance generally as to what I consider is relevant to be commented on. So there is that overview. It's appended to the report, but I personally, but welcome your views. I think more specific, honed in details of where concerns have arisen in the past in respect of individual town or community councils would probably give that added value, so it isn't too general. Going back to the point that Lorna made, there's that danger of, well, some there might be a difficulty for some community councils, but not others. So I think it is more targeted. I think probably would give that added value.
Thank you. Councillor Summers, your hand is up. Do you want to come back?
There we go. I was just really sort of wondering whether, I can't see it at the moment, but maybe I'm missing something, but the 210 paragraph refers to the key points that came out of the last report. I can't see an equivalent sort of paragraph for summarising this report. And I just felt that might be of benefit to the town and community councils to sort of see in general that these are the areas that they might want to look at their own councils, and just satisfy themselves that, you know, there's nothing they can do to improve on those as items that have come up across the council areas in general. Am I missing something saying there isn't an equivalent to paragraph 210 for this report, or
I don't
is
think
it there?
I don't think you are missing anything. No.
No.
Yeah. Karen.
Just to say, Councillor Summers, that those were, as you said, from the previous report. In the main issues that came out of this report related to issues around personal and prejudicial declarations of interest, which is one of those topics, lack of understanding with regard to declaration of interest and adherence into respective council procedure rules of their own. You know, the main that there were less then, I can say, that are in that paragraph that came up this time. But I can confirm that any issues that were raised were addressed with the councils and have been either put into action, that we have been confirmed for, or will be put into action. You know, they may be arranging further training, but there were far less this time than there were previously. Thanks.
Could I suggest that there'd be another paragraph added somewhere, that looking at 210, you could say that with a view to the last overview report, items 1, 3, and 5 have been dealt with satisfactorily, but there's still something outstanding on, for example, 2, 4, and 6, so that to take Councillor Summers' point, you can, as you've just said there, there's been improvement on some of, if not all of the matters, but these matters. So it's there as a matter of record, and then when we do this again in 2 years' time or 3 years' time, we can look at it again. Would that be possible?
Yeah. Are you there for suggesting I amend the report now, or when we go to do it in the future? Sorry.
Well, not now at this moment in time, but could it be added, Debbie, as in the next week or so?
Absolutely, and we can share that with members. I think to be fair, and just to put it in context, you're absolutely right, Councillor Summers. There isn't that corresponding paragraph, but I think it's because of how far we've moved on, and I suppose the rationale is really in paragraph 214, that now rather than having a statement that these are the issues, you know, out of the 26 town and community councils within the Vale of Glamorgan, it's only two meetings where there were sort of like issues. So I suppose it's just having that context, isn't it? That, you know, that there isn't a list now of sort of regular issues which are arising across the piece. So I think we're in a good place. I suppose that's the good news, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, certainly we can certainly have a look at that. But I think, as I say, because of the work that's gone in, and you know, and this is, you know, I suppose is to the credit, as I say, not just to it's also the clerks, it's the chairs of it's the members of the town and community council as well, isn't it? It's a sort of like a group effort. You know, it's just we have moved so far from last year when there were these themes which were sort of arising on a regular basis. So it's that part of that journey. But I mean, if there is anything which is coming up, but I think what we will find is that we're just not in the same place that we were in back in 2022, I'm pleased to say.
Well, I think it's very encouraging that we've made that progress, and particularly from the town and community council side, you know, it's nice that that's being recognised, and that the increased training, I think, that is being progressed through across the councils is having the right effect. I think in that context, it's worth keeping the focus on items that are still even if only in limited areas, but items which are still perhaps not have quite got there. And if it's sort of awareness of what declarations of interest actually are, then that's something that we in the councils need to make sure our training is focused on. So those sort of reminders are useful to us. So thank you very much for, I think if adding it would be useful.
Good, thank you very much. Does anybody else want to comment?
Chair, can I just make a point in relation to the comments that Councillor Summers has mentioned around advising town and community councils? Debbie does make these comments at clerks' meetings with the clerk, so they are reminded of that opportunity as well. And I know I noted it in the report, but just wanted to make it clear for those viewing that we have other opportunities where we can raise these matters.
Yes, good point, Karen. Very good. Right. Nobody else want to comment on this item? Okay, fine. We'll move on to item 7, which is an update on National Standards Committee Chairs Forum. I attended that on, I think it was Monday, and Ronnie Alexander was also there in his capacity elsewhere, so he can correct me if I go wrong. I think it was a good meeting, and whilst this this forum is in its infancy, this was the 3rd meeting, and I know there's reference somewhere, I think, in these papers about the establishment of about the establishment of this review of this forum. I think it's well established now, and I think it's going forward. I think it is worthwhile, and it was a good meeting. You get the notes from the previous meeting. These come out. They are not formal minutes and they're not publicized, but you've received them from the previous meeting. They're not out for the meeting held on Monday. But going through the agenda briefly, we had an update from Michelle Morris, who was the Public Services Ombudsman, or is the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales. Apparently, there's been an 18% rise in cases this year. The last time she addressed us, she thought it was less. There were fewer referrals, but now that's gone up. There are still 116 open cases. She was saying that 32% of cases were now closed, and the aim is to halve the number of aged cases in the next 12 months. I must say, I still think that those figures are very high, but there we are. She explained that, of course, their work is not just limited to local authorities, and they have a considerable amount of work in other fields. So there is progress being made, albeit slowly there. There was then a move on to a discussion about the corporate joint committees, which is very much in its infancy. The resourcing of the Standards Committee, not an awful lot of progress was made on that. There's a considerable amount of inconsistencies throughout Wales. Some councils provide laptops, others don't. They don't provide any assistance whatsoever. There's also inconsistencies about payments. Some councils pay when the independent members go to sit in at town and community councils, others don't. it's an item that's it's being looked at, and also the amount of work that the monitoring office and her group or her people have to spend the time they have to spend on this, and I think that is being considered by the monitoring officer group. I think Francis Duffy is to attend the next meeting. I wasn't sure who Francis Duffy is. Do you know, Debbie? No. Well, if Debbie doesn't know, there's not much chance I know. Right. The moving on, the threshold of £25 now seems to have been accepted virtually everywhere. Except I think one council refused. It moved it because they were at £10, and they said it would look bad if they moved it. So apart from that council, who I don't sure it was named, everybody else has adopted that. There was then an issue on the use of social media, and I think we are well up to date on that. We do advise members about what's going on and the use or non-use of social media. There was a discussion with regard to the civility and respect pledge, which again we are on top of. There's going to be training for standards committee chairs, and I'm going to go on that. I think that's in a couple of weeks' time. But basically, I thought it was a very useful meeting. It is progressing each time. It's well chaired and well organised. Justine Cass of Torfaen is now the monitoring officer appointed to that committee, so she helps. She does a lot. So it was a good meeting. Then I think the next meeting is the 24th of June. There were a couple of other items. There's the local dispute resolution procedure. And one of the councils, I think it was Merthyr, after they had given a decision, either the complainant or the person complained against wasn't satisfied with the decision and had referred the matter to the Ombudsman. Now, I said that our policy doesn't allow any appeals, and I would have taken the view that that was an appeal and they couldn't do so. Are they standard rules throughout Wales, or are ours different?
With regards to the local dispute resolution procedures for town and community councils, and this goes back a number of years now, they were drafted by One Voice Wales, shared with monitoring officers and the Ombudsman, and as a three sort of group, sort of on the three group basis, the consensus was to recommend them to town and community councils, and obviously with the opportunity for each town and community council to amend should they choose to do so. This committee recommended to our town and community councils that, and my understanding is that the majority in the Vale have accepted those unchanged. Now, with regards to the local dispute resolution procedure that we introduced in the Vale, that was introduced prior to the work that was undertaken by One Voice Wales, and it was drafted, if I remember rightly, but I might be mistaken, that was drafted internally. So it's very much a local internal document that was prepared, having regard to the guidance from the Ombudsman at the time, and basically the steer we were getting at the time, and I think I reflected it in the opening section of our internal local dispute resolution procedure. It talks about, at that point, the Ombudsman was recommending that low-level matters should come to, firstly, at the local dispute process, so we've reflected that, and at that point also the guidance that we were receiving referred to that if the complainant at any point wished, prior to the hearing, if we got to hearing, wished to halt the process and take it to the Ombudsman, they could do so. So we certainly reflected the guidance from the Ombudsman at the time when drafting that. I haven't seen any further guidance at a principal council level. Otherwise, we would have done a review. But certainly our procedure, and I concur with you, Chair, does not afford the opportunity for, or as you rightly say, what would be in effect an appeal. So ours is very much self-contained. If the wish of the complainant is to progress to the Ombudsman, they would do that sort of outside of the procedure.
Thank you. And actually, while I remember, it was a point raised by Ronnie was when he asked what we could do to reduce the work of the Ombudsman. And it seems to me that if we carry on with the policy of not having appeals, that saves her some work. An issue was raised, and this was in the monitoring officers group, that whether in the light of the duty to report on the performance of group leaders' duties, authorities allow group leaders to sit on their standards committee, and if so, how they manage any perceived conflict of interest between a group leader assessing their own performance and the performance of their political opponents. I actually spoke on that, and I suppose they were my own views because they were not this committee's views, but I thought no, that they should not sit on this committee, that there would be a conflict of interest and it would make life rather difficult. So that's a brief update of what happened there. Before we come to Councillor Franks, Ronnie, is there anything you think I've missed out that was relevant? Yes, yep. Thank you very much. Councillor Franks? Are you there, Councillor Franks?
Hello?
Yes, right. We can hear you.
You missed 5 minutes of my pearls of wisdom there. Sorry. First of all, thank you and Ronnie for ploughing through all these matters. Much appreciated. It has raised with me something I've been concerned about, is the operation of joint committees. Now, I'm not totally clear what constitutes a joint committee or not. But one of my bugbears is the Cardiff Capital Committee, I'll say, that's not the right word, which involves hundreds of millions of pounds. And I don't get a feeling that this organisation has as much scrutiny as a simple town and community councillor. And I wonder if that was discussed at your meeting. And I wonder where organisations such as the South Wales Fire Service, that has just gone through a horrendous investigation, where does that fit in the scale of things? I'd welcome some guidance.
Thanks. Well, with regard to the first part, the joint committees was new to me, but they have a monitoring officer, and I'm going to pass it over to Debbie to explain what it's all about and the situation here as it affects us. I'd be happy if she does it briefly, because I appreciate it could be a long talk.
Yeah, I won't go into the point, Councillor Franks, that you raised about scrutiny, because that's outside the remit of this committee. But as the chair's mentioned, that there's an interim monitoring officer, and as you'll probably be aware, Cardiff Capital Region is transitioning into the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee, and that'll be up and running from the 1st of April. So a lot of work ongoing in that regard, and certainly I'm aware that arrangements are in place from a standards committee perspective for Cardiff Council. They've agreed for a service level agreement to be put in place for Standards and Ethics Committee of that council to act on an interim basis as the Standards Committee for the Corporate Joint Committee for the South East Wales area. So that is in train, and certainly with regards to standards of the South Wales Fire and Rescue Service, they have their own standards committee, so that would be a matter for their standards committee to discuss. I'm not aware whether the chair of their standards committee is on the national forum, but no doubt an invitation has been extended. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Debbie. Karen, do you want to say something?
I don't know if Councillor Franks is still on. I can see he's come on after me. Councillor Franks, do you want to come back? And I'll come in after you.
Councillor Franks, do you want to comment?
Thank you. Thank you for that clarity. As far as I can see, this committee does not have any responsibilities in respect of the organisations I've mentioned and similar ones. They each have their own standards. Arrangements. Is that a good summing up?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, well said. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen, did you want to comment?
Oh, not on this item. Only just to mention in relation to what you said earlier about the IRPW attending a future meeting. Francis Duffy is currently the chair of the IRPW. They do regularly change year on year, but the current chair will obviously be coming to your future meeting of your Standards Forum to talk about resources, etc. The IRPW is the forum where they recommend to all councils the allowances for members of all elected members, and obviously for co-opted members, and any training or expenses to be payable as well, and also for town and community councils. So obviously that would be interesting from that office and at that forum for a future meeting.
Thanks. And IRPW being?
Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales.
Well, thank you very much. Okay. Right. Unless there are any other comments on that item, we will move on to correspondence with the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales. Debbie?
Chair, as members will be familiar, this is a standard report, just to give an overview that there will be a further verbal briefing on correspondence between my office and the Ombudsman's office, which I'll pick up under part 2.
Thank you very much. Item 9, the review report, panel of independent members of the Standards Committee. Debbie?
Chair, and again in the same vein, this is a part 1 report with the draft report of the panel being appended at later on the agenda under part 2. So this is the public facing report, so that there's openness and transparency, that the significant progress has been made in that regard. It sets out the timelines and the starting point for the panel review, which, as I've said, will be picked up under part 2. So this is for noting at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any items which the chair has decided are urgent? Nothing has been referred to me, Karen. Is that there's nothing that you know of?
No, Chair, there's nothing that I'm aware of. Can I just mention, sorry though, Chair, that I've just had a message from Amy in the chat that apparently not all the members could hear at home, so maybe my request to speak didn't come on straight away. I'm just checking. Did all members hear me mention the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales chair of that meeting? Can a member come back to me and let me know if they heard it at home?
I heard it.
Okay, okay. I was just mentioning the fact that obviously the chair of the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales is Francis Duffy at the moment. They regularly change, and obviously that would be an invited guest to a future meeting of the forum, which no doubt the chair will report to us on. Just in case nobody else did. Thank you very much.
Good, thank you. Well, that completes part 1. Shall we move to part 2? Everybody in agreement?
Chair, if you could bear with us while we take down the recording from the system and we take down the recording from the internet. I can see there are no members raising any issues, so as far as I'm concerned, I can ask my colleague to take down the meeting at the moment then, so that it doesn't go live on the internet for us to go into part 2.